โมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนัมมัสสามิ Good evening, everybody. Those of you living in Melbourne will now be experiencing the calm after the storm. As you know, in the monastery we lost power for a couple of nights, so we weren't able to do a live stream. But sometimes these interruptions to our daily routines, daily schedules can be enlightening in their own way. The electricity goes off, so the electric lights go off, but maybe some light arises in your mind when you realize that the real roots of happiness are found in your own mind and heart, rather than clinging to external things like electricity and heating and phones and cameras and whatever else, computers. Unfortunately, a lot of damage over the last couple of days with the wind. 3 people died, including a young boy, only 4 years old. So we share our merits with those who passed away and express our condolences to their families. It's just another reminder that life is not certain. The weather is not certain, conditions change. Today we're back with sunny skies, everything is calm, but you never know when things will change. One of the responses to the uncertainties of life is that since the time of the Buddha, people have made Buddha statues, even though the Buddha himself didn't instruct his students to do that, and they weren't made in the lifetime of the Buddha. He encouraged people to recollect him by going to a Bodhi tree, either the Bodhi tree where he was enlightened or a Bodhi tree somewhere else, and use that as a simple symbol of enlightenment, or to erect a stupa, a chedi, to enshrine relics of the Buddha. But later on, after the Greeks moved into India a few hundred years after the Buddha's lifetime, as we know, the Greeks loved statues, and so the Greeks, influencing perhaps the local Indian Buddhists, were one of the prime movers in the movement to start creating Buddha statues, and that practice has continued till today. So people tend to make Buddha statues out of stone or bronze, sometimes wood, and place them there, and they give a certain sense of stability. So say you have a storm, you have a Buddha statue, well, you can look at the Buddha statue, and Buddha statues, whether standing or sitting, tend to be serene, still. The eyes usually are peaceful, often they're open, half open, cast down. And it's a simple thing, but it can give you some internal mental stability when you're facing the turmoil of life, whether it's a storm event or just some lifetime kind of storm, like problems with other people or health or things that bring you feeling of insecurity or anxiety. Of course, the Buddha statue itself is not the Buddha. It's simply a useful reminder of the Buddha and the qualities of the Buddha. And this can help when you recollect the Buddha. You can recollect as a meditation by recollecting the qualities of the Buddha, recollecting the life story of the Buddha. That can be very inspiring and bring up a very good sense of a good state of mind to uplift you, maybe in the face of some of the difficulties of life. Some people recollect the Buddha by chanting the verse Iti Piso, and you chant it once. Well, that requires a little bit of energy. We just chanted it a few minutes ago. But some people will take it on as a practice and maybe chant Iti Piso 108 times. And much of the flavor of the Buddhist teachings is about finding skillful ways to summon up energy and effort to overcome your unwholesome states of mind which produce stress and suffering. So if you are feeling down or lost or afraid and you chant Iti Piso, well, if you chant it 108 times, probably you'll find a very powerful change of mind by the time you've completed the 108 cycles of chanting Iti Piso, because it would require a lot of effort put into that chanting, just as we put effort into meditation and other aspects of our practice. If you chant Iti Piso 108 times, well, you can probably see it clearing away the dark clouds of your own gloomy or negative thoughts, whatever's bothering you. And you can experience some of the peaceful mind, the peaceful sky after chanting those 108 cycles of Iti Piso. So this is one way Buddhists recollect the Buddha in practice, and it summons up energy and a good state of mind. Or one could meditate on the Buddha, maybe just using the one single word, Buddho. As our teachers Ajahn and Ajahn Chah would regularly encourage people to recite Buddho. And why is that? Well, again, it brings up effort, brings up energy in your practice. When you recite Buddho, you necessarily are letting go and abandoning other more negative states of mind. Or just bringing your mind to the present moment, bringing up the quality of mindfulness, clear comprehension, and by focusing your mind on one thing, the word Buddho, 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 Buddho. It cuts through all the other distracted states of mind that are coming up. But to develop it as a meditation, you need effort. So again, all the things that the Buddha was teaching us are to help us arouse effort, energy, to overcome our own, what we call mental defilements, negative thoughts that cause us stress and suffering. And when practiced and cultivated, one develops mastery over one's mind. And the Buddha said this is the sweetest victory, the best victory humans can have. Normally in life we're so caught up with our sense of self-identity, our ego, our thoughts about who we are, whether we feel good about ourselves or bad about ourselves. And a lot of that leads to comparing and even competing, rivaling other people in the pursuit of wealth, fame, fortune, and the things of this world. And a lot of suffering. And we, over and over again, we get caught up in reacting to other people, what they say and what they do. And in the most extreme form, leads to conflict with other people, if only in our mind, but quite often through our speech, our actions as well. But the Buddha was encouraging us to redirect that energy that might normally go into conflict with other people, competing with others to get ahead of them, put them down, be the top, get the most, be the most famous, be the most well-loved, well-respected, powerful, richest. The Buddha was encouraging us to see that those are like deluded kinds of self. And they don't last, they're fragile, full of insecurities, full of fears. Whereas redirecting that energy into training one's own mind, to master one's own mind, develop clarity and understanding of one's own mind is, in the long run, is far more productive of peace and happiness, which is what we all want. But it takes a certain courage to start rechanneling, redirecting one's energy, because the pressure of one's mind, influenced by the world, the things of this world, it's always going out and thinks that's the correct thing, always to be going out and trying to control things, own things, have things, influence things outside. And to the cost, our own cost, is that we neglect internally what's going on in our mind. And we don't gain mastery over it, so we're often very prey to external conditions. So, like we see, storm blows, fear comes, or anxiety comes, or at least just the inconvenience of storms and power cuts and things disturbs our mind. And so many other things, of course. So the Buddha was encouraging us to learn how to gain mastery over our own mind. That's the best victory. And one of the Buddhist statues that is famous throughout the Buddhist world is the Buddha sitting. They say the mudra is subduing Mara. So the Buddha sitting with his hand on his knee, the hand touching the ground. And the joke monks have is that the hand is on the knee because when the time comes, the pressure is on, and the Buddha is under pressure mainly from his own mind, just his own internal attachments, desires, pain in the body, tiredness, distracted states of mind, worries, fears. At those times, that's when you want to get up from your meditation cushion and go away. But the hand is on the knee to keep him there, keep him sitting there. So he put his own hand on his own knee, saying, no, sit longer. And anyone who's practiced meditation and worked with their own distracted mind will know that. Sometimes you have to really just tell yourself, no, keep sitting, keep practicing, keep bringing up the mindfulness, keep putting effort into the practice. And that's like you're putting your hand on your knee. Anyway, it's called subduing Mara, that posture or that mudra. And it represents the Buddha at the moment of his enlightenment. He's say the hordes of Mara coming up to prevent him from becoming enlightened, to prevent him from being at peace, to prevent mindfulness and wisdom from arising. So, in the movies, it's always hordes of demons, or the three daughters of Mara coming to tempt him. So there's doubts, there's lust, there's worry or fear of the armies of Mara, and the armies of Mara fire their arrows, but all their arrows turn into flowers and drop at the floor in front of the Buddha because of the power of his mindfulness, his compassion, his wisdom. Even with all the negative energy of the world coming his way, he doesn't let it enter his heart and turn his heart into something negative. So this is why people following the Buddhist teachings often like to have pictures or statues of Buddha. It reminds them of that strength and that energy. The word for energy is virya, and that is often translated as courage or courageous energy or heroic energy, heroic effort. But it's an internal effort that the Buddha was encouraging us to develop. We are aware of the external heroic effort, superheroes and people who go around the world doing all kinds of good deeds and sorting out problems and helping people, and that's good as well. But the kind of more subtle heroic effort the Buddha was promoting is internal, and it's often, it's the effort of the unsung hero. It's the effort that nobody knows about because it's internal and no one else can really see it, unless maybe there's someone else who's also practicing the Dhamma and has some kind of understanding of what one goes through in training the mind. They may also recognize that in another person, maybe. But the kind of heroic effort we're developing to practice is internal. And it's not always when you're on the meditation cushion. That is perhaps where we develop it in a very intense, concentrated way, in a very deliberate way, as anyone knows. Just learning to meditate, having the discipline to sit still when you're tired or distracted, or you've got a mood, or you've got 101 desires to go and do other things bothering you. You're learning to work with your mind, not give in to all of that. That's a heroic effort. But it's not always on the meditation cushion that we develop this kind of effort. It could be any time in our daily life. Because wherever we go in our day, our mind goes with us. And wherever our mind goes, the opportunity for Mara, greed, anger and delusion, and all the sons and daughters of Mara, all the little negative thoughts, deluded thoughts, desires and temptations that trick us and pull us away from the present moment, they're always there, ready to come up. And so we have to be prepared for that, developing this sense of effort and energy in training our mind wherever, whatever. As we know, Luang Por Chah, when people asked him, how can I practice when I'm so busy? He'd say, well, do you have time to breathe? If you have time to breathe, then you have time to practice the Dhamma. And we're always breathing. So we always have the opportunity to practice the Dhamma. And we should develop that attitude, because Mara is always there, ready to outwit us, trick us, get us in trouble. And the Mara we're talking about is these internal negative thoughts, desires, attachments rooted in greed, anger, delusion. It's always there. Where they're really nourished and fed in our daily life is through what we call unwise attention, ayoniso manasikara. So in Buddhism we talk about giving wise attention to things so that we can understand clearly and free the mind from the causes of suffering. Developing mindfulness, clarity, clear comprehension, and then investigating the truth of things gives rise to wise attention. But when we don't do that, which is a lot of the time, we have unwise attention, and that gives rise to the opposite, gives rise to greed, anger, delusion, confusion. And we often are feeding these more negative ways of thinking through our lack of awareness, lack of clarity. We're not on our guard, and so Mara quickly takes over our mind. So the Buddha was encouraging us to constantly be vigilant. And one of the chants we do, which you might be familiar with, the Eightfold Noble Path and the practice of mindfulness, we say, ardent, mindful, fully aware. This is the Buddha's encouragement for developing mindfulness in daily life and learning to look after this mind. We have to be on our guard, because you just never know what's happening, what's going to happen next. But you can't know what's going to happen next, but you can be prepared in the best possible way by developing this sense of ardency, bringing up energy, bringing out mindfulness, clear comprehension, to look after your mind, because something may trigger anger, greed, worry, fear at any moment. So in Buddhism when we talk about effort, we talk about the four right efforts. It's these four right efforts are what we're developing every day through our practice. It's the effort to prevent or protect the mind from falling into unskillful, unwholesome mental states. So before you've even become angry, you're already preventing or protecting that from happening. But sometimes things slip through, Mara slips through. So then the second right effort is, well, if you have become caught up in greed, selfishness, anger, fear, worry, then it's the second right effort is the effort to abandon that. Give it up from the mind. Give it away, give it up, relinquish it. Don't hold on to it, don't dwell on it. The third right effort is the effort to cultivate skillful states of mind, wholesome states of mind, rooted in non-greed, non-anger, non-hatred, non-delusion. And often that effort to cultivate skillful states of mind in itself is helping us to abandon the unskillful ones. And then the last of the four efforts is the effort to preserve what we've got. Maintain it, preserve it. Preserve the wholesome states that have arisen. Look after them. Anyone who's, say, built a house will know, it's one thing to build a house. It's quite a lot of effort to, if you're fortunate enough, wealthy enough, maybe not at this time, but in the past, maybe you've been able to buy a piece of land and then design a house and then engage the builder and build it. And that takes a lot of effort, a lot of hassles, paperwork, all kinds of problems arise in the building stage. And then you finished it and you feel good, you feel happy, the job is done, you can move in, enjoy your house. But actually it's only just beginning. The effort you need to maintain that house is actually more than just in the building, because the building is usually quite a short period of time, a few months, a year or so. But once you've got it, then you've got to look after it. You've got to pay the rates, pay the bills, maintain things when they break, keep it up, look after it, look after the garden, keep the house clean, maintained. Maybe when you have a storm, you lose a few roof tiles. There's maybe a whole lifetime of effort in just maintaining that house. And the practice is like that. You put all this effort into clearing away, letting go of the negative thoughts, preventing them from re-arising, preventing the unarisen negative thoughts from arising. But then you've established wholesome, skillful states of mind, good, put a lot of effort into that, but then the hardest one of all is to preserve them. Because again, that's the nature of Mara. It's like our mind loves to go down to the lowest point, the lowest common denominator, the lowest level, just like water. The last couple of days there was so much rain coming down on the hill, it's just flowing everywhere. But there's one thing you always know about rain: when it lands on our hill, it goes downhill. We never get flooded here really, because it always goes downhill, because we're on a hill. Human mind is like that. If you don't preserve it, look after it, practice with it, what does it do? It always goes down to the lowest level. It becomes lazy, apathetic, greedy, angry, confused, afraid, worried, fed up, whatever. If we leave it to its own devices, it tends to go that way. So that's even though the fourth of the right efforts to preserve what you've got, to preserve what you developed, the mindfulness, the peace of mind, the compassion, the generosity, all the good states we develop, you might think that should be the easiest one, just look after it. But it's not, it's the hardest of all. Because the mind, out of its habit tends to flow downhill all the time. It wants to do that. It wants to go back to its old habits, which only bring us more stress, more confusion, more unhappiness. You may or may not believe in rebirth and past lives, future lives, but one explanation for this is that we've been greedy, selfish, angry, deluded for so many lives. That's what our mind is used to. It's familiar with that. There's all these pathways, familiar pathways it's used to following. Whereas the pathway up to the Dhamma, towards Nibbana, developing the path towards Nibbana, we're not so familiar with. We've done it less. So it takes more effort. It takes effort to go uphill. You have to keep arousing that effort, arousing energy. And this is much of our what takes up our time and energy in our day, in our practice, is how to employ and bring the practice up through our day, every day. Because you'll notice it, even though you do sometimes meditate, morning, maybe evening, if you've got a job to do, of course you can't always be meditating, you've got jobs to do, you've got other things to do. But what happens with your mind during the day? Well, you gradually lose the mindfulness and the awareness, you forget the Dhamma. So a lot of our practice is about re-establishing effort to bring up the awareness, bring the mind back to the present moment, and also to remember the Dhamma, recollect the Dhamma. So if you develop this sort of attitude that your mind is something that has to be looked after, has to be protected, then just like your house, if you built your house, you're learning what does preserve it, how to protect it from the weather, how to protect it from bugs and things or intruders or whatever. Your mind, you're learning how to protect it in daily life, how to look after it. And a lot of the first right effort, this effort to prevent the unarisen negative mind states from arising, is about developing wise reflection and directed to, well, what does stir my mind up in different situations? What makes me get angry? Whether it's people, certain situations, or just certain things you dwell on in your mind, your memories, things you think of. That's something to investigate as part of the practice of bringing up right effort. Get to learn what stirs you up, what makes you fall into more selfish ways, what makes you fall into apathy, neglecting things that you need to do or should do, what brings up lust and attachment, greed, what brings up fear. Actually, to have some awareness and strategies ready for when those things arise, but also learning what situations bring up more negative states of mind, so that maybe you can actually prevent them from happening or prevent yourself falling into old habits. So, the Buddha encouraged us to associate with fellow practitioners as much as we can, which is not always possible, because they tend to give us a good reflection. If you're associating with other people who practice the Dhamma, you may be getting forgetful or unmindfully becoming more negative in your speech, your actions, or more selfish in your behavior. But when you're around other people who are also practicing, you tend to be more aware of that. They give you good feedback, give you a good reflection. So that's a very supportive thing, having good Dhamma friends, teachers, but also just good friends, fellow practitioners. Everyone knows when they go on retreat, they tend to try harder in their practice. They're more careful of what they say, more mindful of their speech, maybe more unselfish in their behavior, helping. So if you go to a monastery or monastic retreat or a meditation retreat, people tend to try, they put forth effort. A lot of that is because other people around are doing the same. We influence each other in a good way. But of course, you leave the retreat, you can't always have those ideal conditions, supportive conditions. So you can't only rely on the words of other people or the good example of others. Sometimes you also have to just come back into yourself and keep bringing up the faith, the energy, and looking to how to preserve good qualities, good habits, getting into good habits in your day. But that requires a certain amount of sitting down, thinking things through. It won't just happen by itself. So part of our practice is sometimes just taking time out to think things through. What do I need to change in my behavior? Where are my weaknesses? What could I improve? And of course, there'll always be 101 things you can improve, but you try to be practical in your approach. What can I improve, and what level of improvement can I expect? Using wisdom in this way, you get to know yourself. You maybe don't take on too much or have too many high expectations about yourself, but maybe just see what small things you can improve in your relations with other people, your attitude to work, how to deal with certain negative states of mind that you see reoccurring in your daily life. Sit down, think it through and say, how can I deal with this? So have a wise conversation with yourself sometimes. If there's no one else to talk to, you have to talk to yourself, don't you? And often that's the most useful thing, but you have to give yourself that opportunity to just sit down and go through these things. Thinking about Buddhist statues reminded me of a story once when I was in Thailand. staying with Ajahn and Nun. We went on a trip to another monastery. In this monastery they had a very old sacred Buddha image. It wasn't so big, but it was extremely heavy. It's made of bronze, very dark colour, but it looked quite serene and had a very powerful feel about it. And we went to see this monastery and met the monk who lived there, and he told us about this Buddha statue. He said, "Oh, this is an antique, it's about 800 years old, so very precious, rare kind of a Buddha statue." And he said, "Oh, people like to come, they believe that there's a Devata that looks after this Buddha statue." True or not, we don't know, but he said, well, they believe that when you make a wish or an adhitthana, a determination, if your wish is going to come true, you'll be able to lift this Buddha statue. You can just put your hands on it and lift it up right above your head. But if the wish you make is not going to come true, it's not possible, you're wishing for too much, too ambitious, it'll be rooted to the ground, you won't be able to move it. And people believe in this, so from time to time they would come and they'd make their wish about their life, their job, or they want to improve things in this or that way. So it gained a certain notoriety in the area. So the monks were all well rooted in right view, practicing mindfulness and wisdom, so they said, "Oh, that's good," but nobody wanted to try it out. And they thought, we don't need something like that. That could be just superstition. So the monks weren't interested, but in the group there was one teenager, who's the nephew of one of the monks travelling with us, and he had come to stay in the monastery. He'd been sent there as a kind of last straw thing. His parents finding it difficult to cope with him. He's a bit of a rough character. He's getting into drinking, which meant he got sometimes into fighting and then chasing girls and spending too much money. So they sent him to the monastery to sort him out. And he was actually feeling a bit down because living in a monastery surrounded by people who kept precepts, practiced meditation, trying to practice the Buddhist teachings, it was exposing his own shortcomings every day. So he was feeling a bit down. So he thought, oh, maybe I can make a good wish and this Deva will help me and it'll give me a bit of inspiration in my practice. And being perhaps still a little bit over-ambitious as a young man, he asked permission from the monk, can I make a wish with this statue? And the monk said, yeah, okay. And he grabbed the base of the statue. He said, I wish to become a Sotapanna, a stream enterer in this life. If it's going to come true, may I be able to lift this Buddha statue above my head. Put his hands on it. And he couldn't move it. It was so heavy, he was struggling. And this was a young man, he's quite strong, been in a few fights, but he couldn't move the statue. And he got really upset. Felt really down. So he thought, I bet. And the monks were quite kind of supportive of him. They said, well, look, maybe you're just aiming too high. There's many ways to improve yourself in the Buddhist practice. So stream enterer, that's a noble one. That's quite a high ask. Maybe just ask yourself something a little bit more modest. Say, okay, if I'm going to be able to keep the 8 precepts, because he was keeping the 8 precepts at the time, shaven head, wearing white. If I'm going to be able to keep the 8 precepts for the rest of my life, may I lift this Buddha statue above my head. Summoned all his energy, and he couldn't move it. So he's a bit down again. So they said, well, just adjust your wish then. So he said, okay, if I'm going to be able to keep the 5 precepts for the rest of my life, may I lift the Buddha? No, couldn't budge it. So he's getting a bit worried now. He thought, okay, my last throw of the dice. If I'm going to be able to do some good karma in this life, may I lift the Buddha? And he did. He lifted it right above his head, and all the monks cheered him on, and he was finally a bit happy. the senior monk who looked after this Buddha explained, he said, well, maybe there is a deva looking after this Buddha, but it's really people's own mind, isn't it? Your own mind sometimes knows inside what you can do, what you can't do, what you're ready for, what you're not ready for. And sometimes your thinking mind, your intellect, is not quite catching up with that yet, not ready to think it through yet. So sometimes when you make these adhitanas with a Buddha statue, the situation is just right for you to something to come to fruition. And strangely, this young man at that time, when he lifted the Buddha above his head, he said it's just like this huge weight was removed from his mind, from his chest. Before that, he'd been feeling really down, recollecting all the unskillful behavior in the past, his sort of lack of gratitude to his parents, and some of the troubles he'd caused both parents and friends and other people. So he's feeling a bit down. But when he made this wish, will I be able to do some good, make some good karma in this life? And he could finally lift the Buddha statue. He said his mind became so light, so elated. He just felt, I can do anything. So it put him in a very positive frame of mind, and after that his stay in the monastery went very well, and by the time he stayed there a long time, many months, by the time he went home he was so grateful to his time staying in the monastery, and he said, I've learned so much. He said, I know I still have a lot of bad habits, but now I can see if you change your attitude, there's always an opportunity to learn, to change. So practicing right effort is a bit like this. First of all, you have to look at yourself and say, there are maybe things I need to change. Then the next step is, how am I going to change? What do I have to do? And that's where you need some wisdom, put it into practice. And maybe you look at some of your bad habits. If you do have a bad habit, you're prone to anger, say, or taking your anger out on other people. Maybe that's where you need to work. So the first right effort is know the problem. I lose my temper too easily. I lose my temper in certain situations, maybe when I'm with this person, my husband, my wife, my brother, my sister, my work colleague, my friend, so-called friend. There'll be people in your life maybe that set you off. So now you've identified the problem. How do you protect from those unwholesome states arising in the future? Well, you maybe have to be on your guard. That's why we use these words like protection, guard. So when I'm with that person, I'm likely or easily going to get irritated or easily get angered. So then be careful around them. Maybe get some strategies. When I'm with them, I better watch my words, mind my words, be mindful of what I say, be mindful of what they say. Maybe there's certain things they say that set me off. So even prepare yourself mentally before you meet that person. You're ready for the situation. Maybe it's their behavior. They do certain things, certain habit patterns of their behavior. So before you even meet them, see them do things or hear them say those words, you're already preparing yourself to be on your guard, to be careful. And another thing that helps you with that is just considering the benefits of this. What do I get out of being careful with people who make me angry, and protecting myself from becoming angry? What do I get from that? Well, think it through. You get the peace of mind, you get the satisfaction of having not given in to anger, what the Buddha said, the sweetest victory. You get the peace of mind, and maybe even your whole attitude to that person or their attitude to you or the relationship may improve. Of course, that may take time. Once is not enough, maybe, but practiced and rehearsed and practiced and gone through over and over again, things can improve in that way. Same with, other kinds of attachment. It could be greed or lust. Like Ajahn Chah said, when he was a young monk practicing, you come into the robes, you practice celibacy. So you no longer engage in any kind of sexual activity. And Ajahn Chah just pointed out the obvious that, you become celibate monk, you keep a very high standard of discipline, but it doesn't mean to say all your lust has suddenly disappeared. You still have it. So you have to learn how to protect against lust taking over your mind. So he said when one of his early years as a monk, he decided for the 3 months rains retreat, he would not look at a woman. Simply not look at a woman, even though he would come into contact with women every day, going into the village to collect food, or sometimes females come to the monastery to offer food or practice. He was not going to look once at a woman as a practice. He just wanted to see, first of all, if he could do it, then also to not engage with something that may bring up lust. And when you're young and not so mindful, lust is easily stirred. So he did that for 3 months, and he said he completed that. So he was obviously very determined, very disciplined, and he managed to do that. What he said was he was disappointed at the end of the 3 months. He had completed what he set out to do. He hadn't looked at a woman, hadn't let his eyes dwell on the form of a woman for 3 months. But at the end of the 3 months retreat, we went in the village, he just wanted to see if there's any change. And he looked at a woman and he realized, still desire there, still attraction for the female form is still there. But he said the important thing was he got this boost of being able to be mindful enough, disciplined enough to restrain himself from looking when part of the mind wanted to look. And right effort is often practiced like that. You have a desire to eat, a desire to look, a desire to indulge in something that is sensually stimulating, brings you some pleasure. But you've realized that's a weakness of mind. It's stimulating desire, habit. So what are you going to do about it? Well, the first thing maybe is just practice restraining that desire. Not giving a look, or not giving a second look maybe. Sometimes it's so fast, your desire to look at something, and particularly maybe the opposite sex or something very attractive to you, before you've even established mindfulness, you've looked, or you've heard, if it's in the case of music or the sound of something that you like. Mindfulness can be so weak, your mind has already gone there. So it may be the second look or the second indulgence in the sound. That's what you can take up to practice with until you get better, more sharper, more mindful, and then maybe the first look is what you can work on. So it's like that, learning how to not indulge in something, not indulge in a situation that will stimulate your greed, your anger, or your fear, your worry. So sometimes that means staying away from people or situations where you can. You don't always have a choice, but in terms of daily life, you do have some choices. And so, learning to be mindful of, how much you use social media, or how often, how long you turn on computers, TVs or things, how much you indulge with conversation with other people. All these very ordinary parts of our life, as you're starting to practice mindfulness and be more aware of mental defilements as a cause of suffering, then you're becoming more aware of the relationships with external situations, sense contact, and how it stirs up greed, anger, delusion in different ways. Maybe a delusion is one, there are certain things that encourage our delusions, like apathy, boredom, just letting the mind dwell on random thoughts or distracted thoughts because you're feeling bored or apathetic, or when you're feeling very tired, or when you're ill. Often you just let your mind go, and the mind just roams around, nothing fruitful at all. It's just getting less and less mindful, and more caught up in maybe daydreams, fantasies, and so on. So looking at your life, looking at how to look after your mind in different situations is a whole area where you're practicing right effort, both to prevent the mind from falling into unskillful states, and knowing obviously what are unskillful states, what are skillful states, what brings up the skillful states, what kind of effort makes the mind, brings up mindfulness, what are the dangers, so what are the things I need to protect against. This is a whole area of our practice, and often people think practices are just about sitting on the cushion, eyes closed, and practicing mindfulness, and maybe letting go of unskillful states, developing whole skillful states at that time. But when you leave the meditation cushion, really that practice doesn't finish. We're learning to practice in a more continuous, even way. So whatever the place, the situation, Ajahn Chah used to say, whatever the posture, standing, walking, sitting, lying down, the effort to bring up mindfulness, abandon unwholesome states, preserve and bring up wholesome, skillful states is always there to be practiced. You'll notice, say, when you're really tired or really ill, that's, in terms of right effort, often that is the hardest effort to practice, to bring up, to look after your mind. Because when you're physically weak, then often that will drag your mental energy away. So to preserve your mind in a wholesome state, say to meditate on an object or to contemplate vipassana, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, or the not self, to contemplate, to see the not self in physical pain or mental pain when you're very tired or you're ill is quite difficult. It's perhaps the most difficult thing of all. But you're learning that as well. You're learning how to always check yourself. Say if you know you're ill or you know you're very tired, maybe you work for the whole day and you're really exhausted, to be on your guard again, to practice right effort. If you know when you're physically tired, it's easy to get irritated, lose your temper, snap at people, or whatever, then be on your guard. Know and have a few strategies. Maybe when you're tired, you say, oh, that's the time I have to find time to be on my own, say, go to my own space, avoid other people, because that way you can avoid falling into irritation or anger. There'll be certain things that you can do when you're feeling very tired like that that are not harmful to your practice or to you, or there'll be certain things, if I indulge now when I'm tired like this, it's only going to make me worse. Some people drink, some people do things that are physically or mentally harmful when they're really tired, and it only makes the situation worse. So again, have that conversation with yourself, look at your life and look at areas in your day, in your life where unskillful states of mind easily arise, and look at ways to change habits, change situations to avoid them. So, in our practice, practicing right effort, there's always more to do. Maybe you're like that kid who was in the monastery. I know I sometimes feel like that. You feel like, oh, I can't do anything right. Everything is difficult. But there's always the opportunity to do something good. That's your starting point in the practice. Can I do any good today? What good can I do? Even if you feel you're hopeless, everything is bad, things are going wrong, what good can you do today? And when you consider the right effort, sometimes doing good is simply not doing bad, not doing evil. So not saying something that's on your mind when you want to say something negative to another person is doing good, isn't it? There's many, many ways we can do good. So if you keep looking for how to develop the good in a situation, there's always a way up. There's always a way to improve your mind. So maybe for tonight, I've just given you a few reflections on the practice of right effort and recollection of the Buddha. So maybe I'll leave it there and wish you all well in your practice.